Okay. Okay, so today's agenda, we're going to go over 5 programs that are currently available. The first one is the Emergency Conservation Program. And as I get to the slide, I'll get a little more specific. But the Emergency Conservation Program gets approved to be used during either a presidential disaster declaration or a secretarial disaster declaration. So with all these winter storms from, late December to this week or next week, that is what the Emergency Conservation Program covers. One we haven't used for a few years is the Livestock Indemnity Program. And basically this is also because of the winter storms. It is for dead animals. And it does cover more than the dairy or the livestock. I'll go over some details to that. And the emergency assistance for livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish is a program also because of the winter storms is active right now. And it covers livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish. The tree assistance program is a cost share program for tree crops, and it does include vines. And then we'll be going over the emergency loans. Okay, so the Emergency Conservation Program does require a sign up. It opened February 13th and it goes until April 14th of this year. The ECP program is a cost share program, and it's used to rehabilitate farmland and conservation structures damaged by natural disaster. And these are the 4 main components: debris removal, land leveling, fence repair and replacement, conservation structures like irrigation systems. The cost share program is 75%, and in these newer programs, 25% advance payments are available. This program does require an environmental review prior to the practice being started. Also, you cannot start this program until the application is approved. It does have a payment limitation of $500,000 per person. There are no adjusted gross income requirements. So this is kind of open to anyone, regardless of your income status. And of course, the deadline is April 14th, 2023. Okay, so the 2023 Livestock Indemnity Program, or LIP, as we call it here in the office, provides benefits for eligible livestock for the death or injury. The death loss does have to be in excess of normal mortality. Injured if it's sold at a reduced price due to injury caused by the disaster event. Everything has to be tied to the disaster event. Payment rate difference by type and weight range. Must file a notice of loss within 30 days of the event. So as soon as you know that you have dead animals, you should be keeping a tally of how many. I know sometimes they go missing for a while, but as soon as you know, a picture would be good, or some kind of identification. A picture for proof of death or injury is required. Must be commercial livestock operation, and it does have an average adjusted gross income that cannot exceed 900,000. So this is one where it has a little bit more limitations. And then I'm going to read over what other things it covers. It does cover chickens, of course, beef and dairy. Let's see, geese, goats, llamas, ostriches, reindeers, sheep, swine, turkeys. And it has a few more, not that that's really common in our area, but I did hear about some people that had chicken losses. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that the LIP program would be able to help on that. Okay, so the next program is the Emergency Assistance for Livestock, Honeybees, and Farm-Raised Fish. And we go ELAP is what we usually say when we're talking about it. And I apologize if we use a lot of acronyms, but just ask and we know that we can explain what we're talking about. But this one is going to cover benefits for livestock feed and grazing losses due to flooding. It also covers loss of grazing land and for stored feed losses. It does cover a maximum of 150 days of daily feed cost or 150 days of lost grazing. You must file a notice of loss within 30 days of when the loss becomes apparent. And it must be a commercial livestock operation. And it also requires the average adjusted gross income cannot exceed $900,000. Honeybee used for production, pollination, and or honeybee breeding. It covers colony, hive, and feed loss. Covers loss of in excess of normal mortality of 22%. You must also file a notice of loss within 15 days of when the loss is apparent. It must be a commercial operation, and it also requires the adjusted gross income not exceeding $900,000. Okay, and the next program is the Tree Assistance Program. This is also a cost share program to replant or rehabilitate vines destroyed or damaged by flood, loss in excess of normal mortality of 18%. And the way that that is determined is we send out a loss adjuster and they go out and do a count and determine if the 18% has been reached, and then we move forward. There is a rate per vine per tree, depends on the variety. Land prep by acre, it's about $500 per acre. The deadline to sign up is, this one has a different time period, but it has to be filed within 90 days of the event or when the loss becomes apparent. This program also has covered diseases. So when you have it tested and you determine that the vineyard, or if you're talking about a vineyard, is no longer of economic value and you're going to pull, that is also covered by this program. Except you can't start the project until the application is approved. There is also a requirement of environmental reviews. Again, there's visits by the loss adjusters, and this also requires the adjusted gross income that can't exceed $900,000.
Thanks, okay. Lisa. All right, just to reintroduce myself again, my name is Josh Azevedo. I'm a farm loan officer out of Stockton, and been a farm loan officer for about 6 years now. I'm kind of helping out right now in your guys' county over there in Marin and Mendocino. And just wanted to kind of go over some key objectives of FSA farm loans, which also relate to emergency loans as well. So the key things here to remember is we provide loan assistance when credit is not available elsewhere. We provide progressive lending. We assist borrowers in graduating to commercial credit, since FSA is looked at as a temporary source of credit. And our third point we do is we help farming operations return to normal after sustaining losses to disasters. So those are our three critical points that what our mission here is. So just to be clear, ours programs here is not a grant program like Lisa's programs are. These are loans. You have to physically pay these back if you go through FSA farm loans. All right, so let's look at our slides here. And we have, so emergency loan funds, back up one. Emergency loan funds may be used to restore or replace essential property, pay all or part of production costs associated with the disaster year, pay essential family living expenses, reorganize the farming operation to improve profitability, refinance farm-related debts, but we cannot refinance real estate debt. That's a key thing there. And to be able to qualify, that loss needs to be to a specific designated disaster, which Lisa mentioned earlier. So a presidential, secretarial, administrator disaster, okay? All right, next slide, Brooke. Okay, so loan limitations. So the maximum loan amount through an emergency loan is $500,000. So keep that in mind. And the loan limit is the amount necessary to restore the operation to its pre-disaster condition. And the applicant may borrow up to 100% of the total actual production or physical loss if necessary. And then just to hit on this point again, you know, you're supposed to do your due diligence to see if you can get credit elsewhere. So depending on the size or the loan amount you're requesting, you might have to provide more than one denial letter. So if you have a request under $100,000, you might not have to supply a denial letter, but when a farm loan officer like myself looks at your application and it shows that you potentially have some assets that could be leveraged to where a commercial lender would be able to finance you, we could request it at that time. But if you're asking for a loan greater than 100,000 to 300,000, we have to have at least one denial letter. And if you're asking for funds from 300 to 500,000, we need 2 denial letters. All right, so EM, emergency loan knowledge. So an applicant has 8 months from the date of the disaster designation to apply for an emergency loan, no exceptions. Farmers do not have to harvest a crop to be eligible for the emergency loan production loss. So typically the way the production loss works is if your crop has more than a 30% loss than its actual production history, then it could be potentially eligible. But most of the time when we do these production loss emergency loans, the crop needs to go to a full harvest to determine if there is a 30% loss or not, unless an adjuster goes out there and says the crop is totally done. Like, for whatever reason it is, the frost killed the buds, or whatever reason is, if we can have an adjuster confirm that, then at that point there's no further crop that can be harvested. All right, so the applicant, and if it is an entity, all members, stockholders, partners, shareholders, and joint operators are required to pledge all non-essential assets as security for EM loans. And then non-essential assets are anything that does not contribute to paying for family living or the farm operation. So this would be like if you have, a boat or an RV or a beach house. Those are types of situations where you would have to leverage those assets and allow us to take that as security. An applicant does not have to have crop insurance at the time of the disaster to be eligible for EM assistance. That's another key thing. So one of the rare circumstances where FSA is able to help equine or horse operations is in an emergency loan situation. So this would be where applicants breed, raise, or sell horses are eligible for this type of loan. And then you can have more than one designation can run at the same time, and they can have different application deadlines as long as they apply to your specific crop you're growing. And then here's another thing. So if you are an entity that receives less than 50% of your gross income from farming, it is not eligible under the emergency loan program. So if you, let's say you're a winery and primarily all of your income comes from wine sales, and let's say you get $1 million for wine sales, and your entity that is part of the winery only produces $400,000 worth of grape production, well, then it wouldn't count at that point. So that's just an example. And if this is the applicant's first year farming, we can still make an EM loan. There's no experience to qualify for the emergency loan in this case. All right, so physical losses. So physical losses can be to real estate and to chattel. So when we say chattels, we're talking about equipment, any type of livestock. We consider that physical loss or stored grain. So, and then the physical losses do not have to have a percentage threshold. So this would be for real estate physical losses. And basically the whole point here for a physical loss is we want to repair or replace the damaged or destroyed property to make it functional again. So, and then all physical losses use replacement costs, current market costs for loss calculations. Okay, so now continuing here. So chattel physical losses. So they're divided into two categories, especially when we're looking at livestock. So we have basic security. This would be like the breeding livestock, the cows, and then normal income security would be the calves. So it could potentially be 2 payments in this case, which I'll go over an example later with you guys. All right, so as discussed a little earlier, we said a physical loss needs to be at least, a physical loss is not tied to the 30% loss like the production loss is. Okay, so besides the obvious buildings and equipment, there are other losses to consider for physical losses. You can also look at permanent crops or vines. So that's another option we can look at. Stored crops are also a physical loss. Also, milk and eggs are considered this as well. All right, getting into production losses now. So production losses are losses resulting from the damage or destruction of annual crops. So once it is harvested, it's no longer a production loss. It would be a physical loss. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, so a 30% loss in a single commodity in a single county makes an applicant eligible for emergency loan assistance. So here's an example. So the applicant has 10% of his corn crop in County A, which suffered a 37% loss. And the remaining 90% of his corn in another county had 105% yield. So the County B was fine. They didn't have any loss, even though that was 90% of where his acreage is. But where his other county, where he only had 10% of it, he suffered a 37% loss. So he could potentially qualify for an emergency loan based on counties A. Okay. So that's one way to look at it. All right. So here's my contact information, or I'm going to send here's my email, but I'll send my contact information here shortly. And I wanted to just run through a couple more scenarios with you guys to kind of give you a better understanding of how these programs play out. So let me throw in a couple examples here. All right, so let's look at scenario 1. So let's say Farmer Mac, the flood affected his operation. He ended up losing, he lost some calves, and he lost some cows, some breeding stock. Okay, so he lost 10 cows, and we valued him at $1,500 a breeding stock, and he lost some calves, let's say 20 calves, and the current market price for that is $350. So between the two of those, between the 10 cows at $1,500 each and the 20 calves at $350 each, it comes out to $22,000 would be the replacement value. So that would be one example of what a loan request could be through a physical loss for cattle. So it would, in this case, it could be a request for $22,000 through an emergency loan. So that's one option. A second option would be, let's look at someone who grows corn, okay? And let's say for whatever designated reason it is, the corn was stunted, and now it's, instead of it producing 30 tons per acre, which is what the actual production history is according to the crop insurance policy, or let's say if they don't have crop insurance, we look at the last 3-year actuals, and let's say that it is 30 tons per acre. And during the flood year, they only got 10 tons per acre. Well, at that point, we know it's greater than a 30% loss. So, and if that county was declared a designated disaster, then in that circumstance, that commodity could be considered for emergency loan. So that's another example. Let's look at a third example. So let's say, for example, you have a tractor. Okay, it's a 1980 John Deere, and it has a value of like $20,000, and it's not. Let's say you don't have it insured. So let's say, you know, whatever disaster goes through, and let's say the flood hits it and wipes the tractor out, destroys the motor, it's not functionable anymore. Well, then FSA can look at replacing that tractor with something that is equivalent. So, you know, we wouldn't necessarily replace it with a brand new tractor, but let's say if there was a similar tractor, you know, and even if it was more, let's say it was 45,000, it was double the price, but it was similar. We could potentially look at doing an emergency loan to buy that tractor, that upgraded tractor. So that's another option that's possible.
Josh, sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure we have a lot of questions around the programs and we are right about a half hour. So do you mind if I just interrupt you for a little bit and we answer some questions?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you. Lisa, I think a lot of them are going to be directed towards you. Does the ECP cover water tanks? They had a 3,000 gallon tank tip and roll down a hill.
Yeah, as long as it is related to the disaster, it should be covered. I don't know what else can happen to a water tank, and maybe it flooded and it floated away, or, you know, damaged it in some way. But yeah, that's one of the conservation structures that would be covered.
Lisa, can we have a couple of people that are row crop folks that are doing mixed veg and flowers. Can you just touch on which programs support row crop damage?
Okay, the emergency conservation program is open to all farming crops, vines, livestock. So ECP would be one that you could get cost share for debris removal, for fencing. As long as the fencing is being utilized to keep livestock in or out, or fencing is included. Grading and shaping, and I have to qualify that because of the environmental review, grading and shaping has to be limited to not disturbing any new soil. So like, for instance, on a vineyard, they may, if there's, say, like a tree falls right in the middle of the crop and it destroys some vines, and you need a little bit of course, you're going to need debris removal, and you might need some irrigation replacement, and you might be able to participate in the crop share program TAP and you know, get some plant reimbursement and planting costs. Let's see, a livestock indemnity program for animal deaths. Like I said, there's different kinds of livestock that are available. So if you think you might need to use this one, you can call in and we can let you know if the livestock is covered. ELAP, that covers like 3 types of crops. It would be livestock, honey, and also the hives, and there's a few other things that on honey it covers, and the farm raised fish. We haven't processed a farm raised fish application, so I'm not really familiar with what the terms are. But if you have farm raised fish and you had some damage, please, you could qualify for ELAP, maybe some ECP. And like I said, usually when people come in on disaster programs, they can use 2 or 3 different types. And then another one that we have, I don't think we mentioned it here, was the livestock forage program, and that was active the last few years. That is strictly for drought. So that's why I didn't mention it. If you thought, why didn't I mention that? Pasture losses due to flooding would be covered under the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program.
So Lisa, I just want to make sure, because this is really confusing. So the disaster declaration for Marin and Sonoma, Vince mentioned they're slightly different. So can you clarify the time periods? I think you'd given me a December date originally for both counties, and how that affects eligibility for these programs. So for example, would flooding damage that occurred during the rains but outside the declaration period not be eligible for ECP or other programs?
Well, these don't work the same as LFP. LFP is a disaster that has like a beginning and an ending period in most cases. But this one, when it's covered by winter storms, flooding, landslides, and I forget the other term, mudslides. I've asked the question, and as long as it's from that type of disaster, it should be covered within the winter period. So there's no established end date, but the begin date, I believe, was December 27th, I think. Yeah, so the begin date, and it's the same for both counties.
So everything from December 20th, 7th on? That's what you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
And then how is normal livestock mortality determined?
That is determined by a national average. And we have a chart that, once someone gives us the number of animals that they lost, we check on the type, and then we use that national average. So we're going right off of a chart.
Can you share that chart in the chat? Is that possible? I could share the fact sheet that had charts about specific animals, but is it possible to share that chart in the chat?
I don't have that right now.
Okay, so can you send it to me and I can send it out to everybody after?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Does ECP cover structural damage to row crop farms? Oh no, we already, does the ECP program cover erosion of property due to a creek?
Well, it depends. It depends on, how large the creek is. If it scours along the sides, I don't think there's anything that we can cover with that. But if the creek overflows and causes sediment to be where it wasn't, we will help pay for the cost to push it back. As long as we're not going down and disturbing new soil, that's what the limit of the grading and shaping is. Like I've heard that there's kind of been like a little landslide in the middle of a vineyard. As long as it doesn't exceed a certain amount of, or what do you call it, depth, we should be able to help put that back. It's not going to be anything in depth. We're not going to cover, a dam, and put that back together. But if it, like I said, if it's soil deposits where they weren't, we need to push them back, or, a minor, not minor, but the main thing is that we're not disturbing new soil.
But if crops are literally flooded, there's no programs that support that for crop loss, like row crops.
Not currently. However, the NAP program, I think is going to probably be one of the programs that will be geared towards smaller crops. So I'm thinking you're talking veggies and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
I don't have anything currently. No, I guess not, other than ECP. If you have a crop and, you need some cost share assistance for those 4 items that I talked about, that is covered. Maybe the livestock indemnity program. Someone has chickens or ducks and they sell them commercially, we would be able to reimburse them for the animal deaths. But I think in the future, the non-insured assistance program will probably be what covers crops. Right now, it doesn't really fit because those veggie crops are not very large, and it requires a lot of documentation on your production records, the price that you sell it at. Sometimes the veggies are worth more than what the rates that we have that we are going to reimburse at. It's apples and oranges. So sometimes it doesn't really cover a vegetable crop very well.
So for pasture folks that aren't able to access the pastures because of flooding or because it's just mucky and nasty, is there funding for that to supplement if now they are having to feed?
Yes, under the ELAP program. ELAP would cover pasture loss or non-use, stored feed. If it's destroyed, if it floods and it destroys a haystack, it'll cover that. It will, that's the one that's going to cover the pasture due to flooding or excessive moisture.
And that's just by showing pictures, or what do the producers need to have to show that?
It's actually, since it's under this presidential declaration, that's not necessary to prove. We might send somebody out to take a couple pictures for the file, but we're not asking for anything to be proven. You do have to have control of the pasture, so we would like to see a lease, or if you own it, we'd like to make sure that you are in control. But other than that, no, there's no documentation that you need for pasture loss.
Okay.
And let me add one more thing. If the pasture loss person purchased a non-insured assistance program policy, they would also be able to file a notice of loss for that.
What about aquaculture? Oysters, clams with winter rains, are they eligible for any of these programs?
Hold on, I was just checking on that. And I just got told on the pasture losses or feed losses, we do need receipts that you purchased it due to the storms. So I guess that's the information that you could collect for that.
Lisa, we'll move on, and you can just follow up with me about the aquaculture, and I can
thank you
about that. Thanks.
I don't think I got that yet.
Okay, the application for the ECP program, is that available online, and could we put that in the chat?
It is not available online. What we're doing this time around is we're filling out a site inspection form. Currently, NRCS has been helping us with site inspections, So we go out and we ask specific questions. And I'd have to find out if I can distribute that ahead of time. I don't see why not, but I would have to check with the state office because they just added a whole bunch of questions to it. And it's not, it's kind of a tool and not an official form. So let me check on that. And if so, then we could probably give that to people as they request it. It's not going to be anything that's online.
Okay, if you're able to, I would love to be able to offer that out to everyone. And then is there a, what's the deadline on ECP?
ECP, I believe, was April 14th.
If they haven't yet declared a grazing loss, can we only go back 30 days from today?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Let me figure out who said it. Sorry, I'm trying to, I got so many questions. Some people have been sending them to me personally, and then some people have been putting them on everyone. So if you by any chance were the one that asked that question, if you can unmute yourself and explain it, that would be awesome. That would be great.
15 days for notice of loss. No.
Lisa, Jessica McIsaac. So livestock, pasture loss grazing, you said you have to do a notification within 30 days. And we're just sort of learning about the program today. And you've also said that both counties had a declaration date of 12/27. Basically, we would start grazing the beginning of the year, sometime in January. But if we didn't make that declaration to your office already, because we're learning about it now, are we only able to capture the window 30 days prior to now, not all the way up to the declaration? The county declaration of 12/27.
Okay, that is not, the declaration that you're talking about is a nationwide, you know, like for California, we had all these winter storms, right? So this presidential declaration covered over, you know, so many counties. So that declaration, all it really does is say that weather caused damage to agriculture. And these are the counties that were affected. That's what that declaration is held to. Now, the pasture that you're talking about that you lost, you do have to have control of it. And we determine that with a lease or if you own the property. For the NAP or the non-insured assistance program, that's the crop insurance policy that would have been purchased last year. That would require a 15-day notice of loss. So like say it rained in January and then it rained again in February and you really couldn't tell if the pasture was lost or not. And then here in March, these final rains, you just, you know, you realize that the pasture is dead and you're not going to be able to utilize it.
Can I stop you? I'm not talking about NAP. You said, I believe it was LFP is the forage loss program. And we know that we have lost the pasture. We've lost it, you know, the last 2.5 months because our cows are not able to go on the pasture. So we're literally losing it every day in a dairy situation because our cows are held in the barn and not out on the pasture. So specifically, that is my question. Can we go back more than 30 days from now?
Yeah. To answer your question, Jessica, the LFP program only applies to droughts. And for 2023, it was approved for Sonoma and Marin counties. So your pasture loss from January to February, it has already been determined a loss for 2023. So you would need to sign up for 2023 by January of next year. And it doesn't require a notice of loss because the drought monitor has determined that loss. We don't need anything other than that. We do have to wait. We do have to wait until after the growing season. And if the local experts tell me the growing season is gone now, that's just even more support for that program. But for flooding specifically, that's not covered, would be under the ELAP program. And I know it's very confusing, but for your situation, for losses in January and February, you could sign up for LFP for 2023.
I'm sorry, I used the wrong acronym and using the drought acronym. The flooding acronym that correlates to loss of grazing pasture. Can you tell me that one, please? And that is specifically what I am trying to ask, even though I used the wrong one.
Okay, so the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program, is that the one you're talking about?
Loss of
Lisa, I think what Jessica's talking about is ELAP for loss of pasture from flooding.
Yes, that would require a 30-day notice of loss.
So the answer is that you can only go back 30 days from now. Okay.
Well, it has to be when you determine that the pasture is no longer usable. So like I said, say January, it rained and you had storms, but you thought there still might be some pasture available. And then February came along and it rained again and you still thought that you still might get some pasture out of it. But by March, you decided, this is not going to grow. This is the time that you noticed the loss, 30 days from that day.
Okay, so
if your determination date that the pasture loss was March 15th, then you have 30 days from March 15th to file a notice of loss.
I think there's a lot of confusion with good reason, but I just want to, Lisa, that we want to make really clear that producers can reach out to your office directly to follow up on specific programs. And is the best way to call, email, come in person? Like, are you open now for people to make appointments to come in?
Yeah.
And can they literally fill out the paperwork with you while they're in there?
First of all, after COVID, we are taking scheduled appointments for in-person. And usually we go over all the programs and whether you are eligible for them or not. Yeah. Okay, so for the non-insured assistance program, where you've bought the policy, you can't wait to sign up for that. You need to call in as soon as you notice the loss. You do have 15 days. So like I said, if you have that pasture and you decided on March 2nd that was a loss that's going to affect you, then you would want to contact our office either by email, by phone. That is considered a notice of loss. You don't have to have a scheduled appointment to file a notice of loss. So that's important to remember. Just call our office and tell us that you need to file a notice of loss for your non-insured assistance program. Same thing with ELAP. If you had some pasture that was lost due to flooding or excessive moisture and it's just too muddy to get out there, you need to determine that. Say you determine that on February 15th, you have 30 days from that date to file that notice of loss with us. And also that can be filed over the phone, fax, email. It's not a big inconvenience to call the office and let them know. And if you're in doubt, just file it anyway. it would be better to call and let someone know in the office that you suspect a loss for NAP and ELAP. Those are the two ones that you have to make sure that you get that notice of loss in.
So if you don't have pictures of the dead animals, is there another way to be able to access that indemnity program?
Yes, but it's quite involved. So I'll leave it at that, that yes, there is, but I would hope that if you know that they're dead and you can see the carcass, to please take a picture of it.
Going back to veg producers or row crop folks in general, if there is, sounds like the only program to assist with losses associated with damage, lost crops in the field is the emergency loan. Is there anything to assist with delayed planting due to rains? So farmers who can't plant due to excessive water for 30 days later than normal. So I guess it's good for.
No, there's no such program, not for FSA anyway.
Can you walk through a typical timeline of assistance that requires an environmental review prior to submission? If there is a 30 or 60-day timeline on the time, does this allow for sufficient time for environmental review? So the farmer must go out of pocket for the environmental review, but not have a clear line of sight if the program will be able to assist them.
The environmental review that I'm talking about is one that's done internally. There's no payment for someone to do an environmental review, if that's what you're getting at.
Yes, that's what Suzanne is asking.
Yeah, that it's an internal environmental review.
For the livestock deaths, could you get a copy of the pickup and use that? Like
Yes.
receipt from the pickup, would that be suffice?
Yes.
And then can you guys, when I put the, sometimes the wrong FSA number comes up when you Google, can you put the correct office number and the email for people to make appointments or call in, please?
Yeah, I've notified that that number is wrong several times and they still haven't changed it. I don't have control of that, but yeah, I'll put it in the chat, the correct phone number. Yeah. There you go.
And then an email as well. Can they email to make an appointment to come into the office?
Yes. I will put in the chat the office email that goes to every single person in the office. Sometimes producers will email me, and if I'm at a meeting or I don't check my email as often as everyone else does. So if you send it to this general office email, everyone will get it. And if it needs attention, someone will get back to you within, 24 hours. So that is this.
And then are there any more questions? Yes. Yeah, so what would be great, Lisa, we talked about this before, is that I'd like to follow up with everybody with the fact sheet, the sheet around the livestock mortality that you mentioned, the ECP application, if we can get that, that would be great. And then the slides we'd like to be able to share with everyone too.
Hey, Carrie, this is Brooke. I will make a PDF of the slides and send them to you.
Great, thanks. So slide damage, would that be considered under erosion?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Any more last minute questions?
Yeah, this is Josh again here. So yeah, just anyone, if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about their individualized situation, or at least with loans, feel free to give me a call. I'm more than happy to, go over your situation, or if you want to pick my brain, I can give you my thoughts, or, go over some options with you that might help your financing need. So just wanted to throw that out there. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody. And I'm going to put my number and information again below here in the chat. Okay.
Carrie, I just wanted to add that if someone is having erosion problems, don't forget our sister agency, Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS, has programs for that and can probably give you more information. Our programs are not really geared towards solving conservation problems.
Sorry, I'm trying too many things at one time. All right, everybody, I just put Suzanne, can you email me directly so I make sure I have your email so I can follow up with you and give you all the materials? And I can probably just try to send it out to all the livestock folks if you're on the UCCE Sonoma list, and then Vince can send it out to the Marin folks. And then Scott's mentioning that if you're multed, you can reach out to him directly and specifically about erosion issues. And feel free, if you weren't comfortable asking your question, you can email me directly and I can connect you with Lisa and we can have a side conversation if need be. But really appreciate, this is a good start, and feel free to reach out to me at any time. And thank you so much for attending today's webinar. And thanks so much, FSA.